I'm joined by the foreign editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan. This was greeted with great joy and relief in Israel, the news of the rescue of 4 hostages, Greg.
Yes, Kieran, understandably a magnificent effort by the Israeli commandos to get their people out. It's a very difficult operation because as soon as the Israelis approach, the Hamas terrorists are likely to kill the hostages. A great shot in the arm for the Israeli government. Probably doesn't affect things fundamentally. I think the criticism of Israel for the operation is misplaced. Terrible tragedy that Palestinians were killed, but undeniably they were killed because Hamas put the hostages in the middle of civilians. And then when the Israeli soldiers went to rescue them, Hamas was not defending Palestinian ground or anything. It was engaging in a major firefight with the Israeli soldiers in order to keep possession of these innocent hostages. And of course, it's almost certain that a large number of Palestinians would have died from Hamas fire, which was very indiscriminate. If Israel could do more of these operations, it would, and I think it would get great support from its own people.
What's your read on the ceasefire, the proposal agreed to now by the UN Security Council?
Well, the Americans and the British and everyone else have been telling us for months now that the obstacle to a ceasefire is Hamas. So Hamas has put on conditions for accepting any kind of ceasefire, which it knows Israel cannot possibly accept. One of them is that Israel has to withdraw permanently and totally from the Gaza Strip. Well, I've spoken to a lot of Israelis over the past several months, and they're very, very clear that whoever governs Gaza after this conflict, the Israelis will retain the right to go in and deal with terrorists as they emerge, as they do in the West Bank, because otherwise they're just going to have October 7 all over again. So I think Hamas has done quite a dance on this stuff and just has the view that the current situation benefits it. Israel gets beaten up in the international media every day, loses support in the United Nations, and no one puts Hamas under any pressure to accept a ceasefire. Whereas from everything the Americans have said, Blinken has said this again and again and again, really for the last 3 months, probably longer than that, Hamas could have had a long temporary ceasefire, 6 weeks at least, just in exchange for 30 hostages. And even today, it could have a long ceasefire with negotiations towards a permanent ceasefire. But I think it wants conditions which either mean Israel doesn't eliminate Hamas or Israel cannot operate in Gaza anymore in the future. And those conditions, no Israeli government, doesn't matter whether Benjamin Netanyahu is the leader or not, no Israeli government could accept those conditions. And they're not the conditions America is imposing. They're the conditions Hamas wants.
The European elections, a partial shift to the right. How significant is it?
It was a substantial shift to the right, but less significant than possibly we expected. It's pretty clear that the Europeans are having a major backlash against their Green New Deal. There's massive propaganda, massive media and government effort in favour of the sort of ideology of getting to net zero as quickly as possible. But as a result, Europe now has sky-high energy prices, massive government deficits all over the continent, and its social contract is more or less collapsing. And so the big loser out of this election was the Green parties. Some populist parties did very, very well. So Marine Le Pen won as much of the vote in France as the Labour Party wins in Australia. Giorgia Meloni won a similar vote in Italy, and the People's Party won in Austria. More wild, radical right-wing parties like the Alternative for Germany, they got an increase, but a much smaller increase. The populists themselves are very fractured, and some of them are compromised by their association with Vladimir Putin. But the mainline centre-right parties did well, and all the populists got an increase in their vote as well. And some extreme left-wing parties did well as well. which shows me that there is a real fraying of faith in mainstream institutions across Europe. I think this rebellion against the green policies is just going to grow and grow as their cost gets greater and greater.
Greg Sheridan, thank you. We'll chat to you next week. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kieran.